This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 2021 edition of Opening the Box. This month, I'll be talking about the Civil War research resources in the collections of the Richardson-Sloane Special Collections Center of the Davenport Public Library. My name is Katie Reinhardt. I'm one of the librarians at the center, and I will be sharing with you materials in our collection that document the activities of Iowa Union Army soldiers. And I will introduce each type of material in an order that roughly follows the cycle of a soldier's service. So let's start with the first type of record. These are enlistment records in our collection, our microfilm collection. And I'm going to go ahead and read how this one begins. It says, State of Iowa, Town of Davenport. I, Winfield S. Kingsbury, born in Franklin County in the state of Indiana, aged 18 years and by occupation a farmer, do hereby acknowledge to have volunteered this 14th day of December, 1862, to serve as a soldier in the Army of the United States of America for the period of 3 years. So we have a lot of information here. We know where this man was born, how old he was when he enlisted, his occupation. We know what his signature looks like. And we can also learn that he was sworn in at Davenport by the recruiting officer Charles Stearns of Company A, 8th Regiment, Iowa Volunteer Infantry. So, and then down below where it says, where the certification is, it says that this soldier has black eyes, brown hair, a fair complexion, and is 5 feet 7 inches high. So now you also learned some physical details of this soldier. And then on the back of the document, there is a consent in case of a minor down at the bottom, and that is signed, I, George W. Kingsbury, do certify that I am the father of Winfield S. Kingsbury, that he is 18 years, and thereby freely give my consent to his volunteering. So now you have the name of a family member and you know his relationship to the volunteer. So we have the enlistment records for from August 1862 through 1865, and these are actually, the originals are at the State Historical Society of Iowa, but what we have that's special is the index, so that you can actually search for a name from our local database on our website, the genealogy and history website of the Davenport Public Library site. So so that's the first kind of document we have. Then once you've looked into how someone enlisted, how a soldier enlisted, there's an important Iowa source you should consult giving an overview of the service, and that's the roster and record of Iowa soldiers. So you can verify the enlistment information you may have gotten from the primary source document and get other details. and connect the individual to a brief history of the unit, the regiment in which he served. So we have this source in printed volumes on our open stacks. It's also on microfilm, and you can get it through the Iowa Gen website. And for Scott County, especially, and for all of Iowa, that website has a very good collection of Civil War materials. So that's definitely something to check out. So if we look up Winfield S. Kingsbury in this source, we find out a little more about him, where he mustered in and out, and when. That he was wounded in his left side in Pleasant Hill, Louisiana, and he came from Mount Pleasant, Iowa. So to find out more about the soldier service record, you can find what's called a compiled service record that's available to be ordered from the National Archives. And we happen to have in our microfilm collection an index to that. So that's something else that you can consult in doing research. So later on in the war, in the spring and summer of 1864, the Union Army had a drive to recruit men for what they called a 100 days long service. So they called the men recruited then the 100 days men, and they would be assigned garrison duty in order to release the more experienced veteran troops to join Sherman's Atlanta campaign. So we happen to have in our collection, I believe it comes from the Scott County Auditor's Office, this record of the 44th Regiment of Iowa Infantry, Company I, and it lists how much bounty, that would be payment, that each soldier is going to be is owed to be paid, and the different columns indicate to whom the soldier would like the money to be paid, and then he would sign it. So this information was collected by Captain Brooks while they were out in the field. So they were in Memphis, Tennessee, only days after they had mustered at Camp Kinsman in Davenport. So they were sent out for the garrison duty right away after mustering in. So you can see some examples where where the soldier would ask for one of his family members to receive the payment, and some others just want Captain Brooks to hang on to it. So that's a very interesting look at the activity of that special kind of recruits. So after enlisting, a soldier would muster in at a training camp. So what were these like in Iowa? Well, pretty much the definitive study of this that's full of primary source materials is the Iowa Civil War Rendezvous Camps, 1861 to 1866, a study by James Jacobson. And he created this work from a manuscript that was worked on by a gentleman named Everett Geerink, and also used some of the research materials that Geerink had collected. So we have in our collection the Geerink information. So if you want to drill down into the primary sources about the rendezvous camps in Iowa, even more so than Jacobson does in the summary work, we have those available in our collection. And we have the chapter on the camps in Davenport. So one of the primary sources that Geerink and Jacobson use extensively are newspaper articles that describe the various camps, how they were set up, who the officers were, what kinds of difficulty there was, what kinds of construction had to occur. So as an aside, I just want to mention that for information about these different Iowa localities during the Civil War, the local newspapers are definitely a good source for all kinds of war-related activities. And we don't just have the Davenport papers, we have some other regional papers, including the DeWitt Observer. So what happened when you were in a particular camp as a soldier? So we have this source written by architect Seth Temple. That it was a paper that he read before the Contemporary Club in Davenport in October 1927. Temple was an architect who was a resident and an architect of a lot of the homes in the McClellan Heights development, which had just started to get to begin to grow in the 1920s. So he gives some details about Camp McClellan in particular, and especially with this map, we can see where the placement of the different buildings were in relation to what's now the current layout of the streets in that part of the city. And you can start to visualize what the camp looked like, the guardhouse, the location of the stockade, the guardhouse, the pest house, and their relation to the current layout. These are drawings of buildings at Camp McClellan and Camp Kearney from 1865 after the war was over, but this is another source we have in our collection from the City of Davenport engineer, W.D. Clark, and it's drawings from his notebook. This particular one shows the barracks at the Indian camp where the Dakota Sioux were imprisoned for a time at Camp McClellan. So with these two sources, you can start to visualize parts of the camp. To find out more about what particular soldiers did in this particular camp, there are the monthly returns of the camp that are collected, that are available from the National Archives. The title of this one is The Return of the Soldiers and Recruits of Regiments and Batteries of Iowa Volunteers, Army of the United States, Captain Littler, for the month of July, 1863. It gives the number of men present at the camp, absent, officers and enlisted men. The enlisted men on extra or daily duty are accounted for by name, as are the absent enlisted men. And you also have the names of the officers. So we have the microfilm from the National Archives again, because it was something that Everett Gehring collected for us. And a personal experience of the Camp McClellan was described in a letter written by Peter Wilson, part of the 14th Iowa Infantry Company G, in October of 1861. And there's some great details in this, such as he says, our shanties, meaning the barracks, are made as tight as a good barn, bunked up like a ship, two in a bunk. We have plenty of straw and we are very comfortable. Our fare consists of beef, bread, beans, potatoes, rice, and coffee. We get plenty to eat and good enough. We are satisfied with our camp arrangements. And he talks about drilling, going down to the Mississippi River to wash. And he says also, if anyone gets on the spree or misbehaves in any way, he is put into the guardhouse. One got in tonight for stealing a pipe and another for stealing a pie. There is a great variety of character among 3,000 men. So this source comes from an excellent resource called Iowans Called to Valor, which collects letters written by soldiers on a number of different topics about war activities. We actually have a manuscript letter in our manuscript archives and manuscript collection that is written by Private Francis M. Flory from Camp Benton, and that's where he goes after his unit has been mustered in at Camp McClellan in Davenport. He describes the experience of traveling from one camp to the other, and he actually thinks that Camp Benton is a little bit nicer than Camp McClellan. So he's in Company G of the 11th Iowa, and this letter is written to his parents. It's a type of letter sheet that was available to soldiers. You know, that was a pre-printed sheet. So we can learn about camp experiences through this document. There are also lots and lots of published letters in our published materials collection on our shelves, our open shelves and special collections. They can be easily identified with the subject headings Soldiers, Iowa Correspondence, paired with the subject heading Iowa History, Civil War, Personal Narratives. So one example we have in our collection is the Murray family of Scott County, Iowa and beyond. Chapter 5 includes letters written to Thomas Murray in Davenport from his brother William Murray and cousin Thomas Murray, who both served in Company C of the 20th Iowa Volunteer Infantry Regiment. So you can find letters and other personal accounts like this reproduced within published genealogies like this one, and you can also find them in the published county histories, which we certainly have in our collection as well. And another, and there, as well as for personal narratives, there's also published diaries available in our collection. The Civil War Diaries of Jacob Gantz, Such Are the Trials, is the experience of a gentleman in the 4th Cavalry. And the other example is Downing's Civil War Diary. He was in Company E, the 11th Iowa Infantry, and was a participant in Crocker's brigade. These are Tintypes, an image format that was meant for soldiers on the move. It was small enough, well, as the, this one's from Olmsted's Photograph and Gem Gallery that was on Brady Street in Davenport. And so it was meant for soldiers on the move because, as it says on the back there, these pictures can be finished in a few minutes. They were also less expensive than other available photography, and they were small enough that a soldier could carry an image of his loved one with him. So those sources that I just went over, they describe personal experiences in the war. And there are also sources we have in our collection that show that describe group experiences. This one shows members of Company C of the 8th Iowa Volunteer Infantry that was organized at Camp McClellan, having their photo taken together as a company in St. Louis. And we know that the guy on the right, the right corner seated has the name Lytle Stevens. So another type of source that we have in our collection, again, thanks to Everett Geerink, is the compiled records showing service of military units in volunteer union organizations. And this describes Francis Flory, who wrote the letter from St. Louis that we have a copy of. It talks about all of the railroad and steamer travel to Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee, where the unit did engage in battle in March and April of 1862. So this is information that's compiled on these cards by members of the National Archives staff, I suppose, or um, in the 1890s, I believe, sometime from various sources. So there's also regimental histories. This one is from a collection called The Undying Procession, Iowa Civil War Regiments. And it shows a page from about the 8th Iowa Cavalry Regiment, who were participants in an operation known as Croxton's Raid through Alabama in March and April of 1865, towards the end of the war. So this one's from a collection, but there are many, many of these available, some of them rare in our book collection, Regimental History, that describe troop movements and battles and other types of engagement. And those can also, they're also available throughout the River Share system. And so you would use the same subject heading to search for those in the catalog, Iowa History, Civil War, but then you'd add on regimental histories, and that's how you can get a hold of those. And then we have some documents, the papers of Peter Heckert, who was a resident of Davenport, and learn more about his experience in the field, of his unit in the field. He was in charge of outfitting his company, the Company B of the 2nd Iowa Infantry, with equipment and other kinds of supplies. So this was something that he did in the field, or that the whole, it tells you about how the whole unit operated in the field. They were in Goldsboro, North Carolina in March of 1865. Oops. And that's the correct slide. Peter Heckert's paper. And then we also have, we just happen to have in that collection a certificate that promoting him to the rank of 2nd lieutenant in 1864. And then I'll go back this way to the records we have of Company K of the 4th Regiment of the U.S. Veterans Reserve Corps. This tells you about the experience of a special kind of unit that was active locally on both sides of the river here. They were organized in October 1863 at Rock Island. It was a regiment comprised of older, wounded, and infirm soldiers who were unable to serve in the field. They were given guard and other light duties. And this particular group of men were guards at the POW camp on Arsenal Island, also at Camp Roberts in Davenport, and at Camp McClellan. They guarded the prisoners, the Dakota Sioux prisoners. So this descriptive role lists the age, details of appearance, birthplace, and original enlistment information. And many of these soldiers were from Davenport and Scott County. Their names are also indexed in our local database on our website. So we also have several types of, or several examples of discharge papers, soldiers' discharge papers in our archives and manuscript collection. These are the papers of Henry Kluglin of Davenport. He had served as a bugler in Company E of the Iowa 2nd Cavalry. He was discharged at Memphis, Tennessee in February of 1864 by reason of re-enlisting as a veteran. And then again he was discharged in September 1865 in Selma, Alabama. And his gravestone is at the City Cemetery in Davenport, Iowa. And this is just in a collection of personal and family papers. And the same goes for the discharge papers of Gustavlus Fredericks. He was also from the same cavalry. He was a farmer in Scott County, born in Kappeln, Schleswig-Holstein. And the source documents the return home of soldiers. This is an illustration from Harper's Weekly magazine for September 21st, 1861, called Return to Davenport, Iowa, of the Iowa 1st Volunteers. And this was created from a sketch by Mr. H.C. Ford of Davenport, Iowa. And there's also a Davenport correspondent who speaks through in this issue of the magazine, talking about a procession to receive the soldiers consisting of 1,200, consisting of the fire companies, the Turners, other associations, many citizens, thousands in attendance. They passed under the triumphal arch that was supposedly at the corner of Main and 2nd Streets. So they passed through the arch and proceeded to the courthouse yard, where they were addressed by Judge Dillon and partook of a splendid dinner prepared by the ladies. So we just have a copy of this in our collection. Now, after the war was over, sometimes soldiers who had not been paid, such as these fellows from Scott County, would bring a case to sue for the soldier's bounty that was owed to them. And there's individual names listed out on these records too. Two on the list that you can see on the first page are Albert Baluf and Ferdinand Haig, who are both German immigrants and cigar makers in Davenport. And after the war, the Grand Army of the Republic was formed. This was a fraternal organization of Union veterans who, and the local chapter in this area was called the August Wentz Post Number 1 of the Grand Army of the Republic. They worked to assist families of fallen soldiers and also to preserve their memory and burial sites. These are the notebooks of A.W. Kranz, who was the commander of the GAR post in 1916, and he's here documenting the burial sites of soldiers in the area, and these pages show lists of those buried in Oakdale Cemetery. And these also include the list of those who were moved from Oakdale to the Rock Island Arsenal National Cemetery in 1867. And then last but not least, we have another organization, the records of another organization dedicated to preserving the memory of these soldiers who fought for the Union, the Daughters of the Union Veterans. We have the collection of the Catherine Duffin tent, number 7 of the city of Davenport. And here I'm showing the membership application and also the record of acceptance of a woman named Nettie Vollmer, who was able to document the fact that her father, Joseph Manuel Jackson, had served as a driver in Company D of the 54th Illinois. The tent in Davenport was named for the widow of Samuel Duffin, who was a lieutenant, a member of the 16th Iowa Infantry, and had received a gold medal for the Battle of Vicksburg. And this collection recently arranged and described by our esteemed supervisor also includes the meeting minutes of the organization from the 40s to the 1940s to through the 60s. So, and then one last organization dedicated to the memory of the Civil War in this area is also that there was a Civil War roundtable in Davenport, and we have 2 papers that were presented in the 1960s, one by now history professor emeritus from Eastern Iowa Community College, Dr. William Roba, as a teenager, and another written by his mother. So hopefully we can continue to acquire these kinds of Civil War documents, so we have plenty of primary source materials for our researchers to look into and find out more about local history. So if you know of any, let us know. And thanks very much for joining me today. Please feel free to contact me or any of the staff at the Richardson-Sloane Special Collections Center of the Davenport Public Library. Bye now.